The holographic contract flickered to life, casting eerie blue light over the room's metallic walls. The figures gathered around the display were legends in their own right, mercenaries, assassins, killers who had toppled entire regimes. And yet, when the name of their target appeared, a silence stretched across the chamber. Varric Tiran, leader of the assassin team, leaned forward, his cybernetic eye scanning the details. His reptilian features twisted into something between confusion and amusement. A human. His voice carried the rasp of someone who had breathed in too much battlefield dust. Braga, the brute of the squad, let out a mechanical laugh, the sound grating from deep within his cybernetic throat. That's got to be a joke. They went extinct centuries ago, didn't they? He cracked his reinforced knuckles against the table. Or maybe one crawled out from whatever hole they died in. Naris Vok, the group's infiltration expert, remained silent, feline eyes narrowing. Unlike the others, she didn't laugh. Instead, she tapped a claw against her wrist interface, scrolling through the mission reports. Her fur bristled slightly as she skimmed through them. "Something's wrong," she murmured. Varric turned his head, predatory curiosity piqued. "Explain." She hesitated, scanning the records again. "This contract has been placed 5 times before. Every hunter who took it never returned. No bodies. No distress signals. Just gone." The amusement in the room faded. Varric exhaled slowly, the ridges along his neck rising. "So, someone's picking off our own." He shifted his gaze back to the holographic display, fingers drumming against the table. "That makes it personal." Braga snorted. "Personal? Please. It means 5 teams were incompetent. This isn't some ghost story. It's one fleshbag against us." "That one fleshbag has a perfect kill record," Naris said, her voice low. "We don't even know his name." Varric gestured to the display, locking the contract with a final tap of his clawed finger. "Then we change that." The mission was set. The hunt began. The dropship entered the planet's atmosphere with a silent descent, its hull absorbing radar scans and cloaking itself from detection. The world below was a dead one, war-scorched ruins stretching across a barren landscape. Rusted ship husks, toppled spires, and blackened craters whispered of battles long forgotten. As the team disembarked, their boots crunched against the brittle remains of civilization. A thin haze hung in the air, the scent of old fire still clinging to the wind. Braga rolled his shoulders, flexing the hydraulics in his cybernetic limbs. "This place is a tomb." "Stay focused," Varric ordered, his voice clipped. He lifted his rifle, its sights scanning for movement. "No chatter unless it's critical." Naris was already ahead, her form blending into the shadows. Her feline eyes glowed faintly as she activated her tactical overlay, scanning for heat signatures. "No life readings," she reported. "If he's here, he's masking his presence." Varric crouched, brushing his fingers against a weathered surface. The cracks in the stone weren't from age or erosion. They were marks, deep, deliberate. Claw marks. He stood, muscles tensing. "He's here." Braga huffed. "Then let's stop skulking around and flush him out." He lifted his massive plasma cannon and fired into the nearest structure. The blast tore through the ruins, sending debris and dust cascading into the air. For a moment, nothing. Then, a whisper. Varric spun, rifle aimed. But the sound wasn't a voice. It was something softer. The movement of air. A shift in the dust. A presence, one that had been there all along. Naris sucked in a sharp breath. "Something's watching us." Braga barked a laugh. "Yeah? Let him watch." He turned, taking a step forward. And vanished. No sound. No struggle. One moment, he was there. The next, empty space. The team froze. Naris activated her scanners, her claws trembling slightly. His signal just disappeared. Varric kept his rifle trained on the ruins, his voice cold. "Weapons up. Formation tight." A clicking sound echoed from above. Not mechanical. Not organic. Something between. Naris turned her gaze skyward. A shape moved in the darkness. She fired instinctively, the energy bolt illuminating the figure for less than a second. But it was enough. A silhouette, humanoid. Then it was gone. Varroc's voice was sharp. Report. Neris forced herself to breathe. His fast. Too fast. Varroc's mind worked at brutal efficiency. Bragas down. We recover or we retreat. A sound cut through the silence, Bragas' voice, weak and crackling through their comms. He's hunting me. Static. Then a final whisper. Run. The line went dead. Varroc's grip tightened around his weapon. We move. Now. Neris hesitated, her tail twitching. Are we extracting or finishing the job? Varroc's eyes gleamed in the dim light. Both. They advanced deeper into the ruins, their footsteps careful, deliberate. The hunter had made his move. Now it was their turn. Final scene, the warning. They found Braga minutes later. Or rather, what was left of him. His massive frame hung from an old support beam, strung up like a trophy. His armor had been peeled away, revealing brutal, precise wounds, ones meant to send a message. Neris stared, a chill running through her bones. No ordinary prey does this. Varroc stepped closer, his keen eyes catching something carved into the metal beam beside Braga's corpse. A warning, written in a language no one had spoken in centuries. Except Varroc recognized it. It was human. The words were simple, terrifying in their meaning. Hunt me at your own peril. A slow realization crept through him, deep and unsettling. The contract had never been about the money. It had been a test. And they had just failed. The sunless sky hung low over the ruined city, a heavy blanket of ash and dust suspended in the air. The wind whispered like the remnants of forgotten souls, sweeping through shattered buildings and scattered debris. Varroc's boots crunched softly against the earth as he moved forward, his mind racing. Braga's body hung in front of him like a grim reminder of the unseen force that now stalked them. He clenched his fists, fingers curling around the haft of his plasma rifle. The blood on the ground was still fresh. He's playing with us. Neris's voice was a low growl, barely above a whisper. She stood beside him, her sharp eyes scanning the horizon. Unlike the others, her every movement was calculated, quiet, like a predator herself. Her ears twitched, the fur on her tail standing on end. That's what makes him dangerous, Varroc muttered. His eyes lingered on the jagged hole where Braga's body had been left hanging. The symbols etched into the metal beam beside it were unmistakable. Human. Neris glanced at him, her gaze unwavering. We're not dealing with just any human, are we? Varroc shook his head. No. This one is different. His voice was tight, filled with a hint of something darker. And we're going to need more than our usual tricks to handle him. They moved deeper into the ruins, their formation tighter now. Every step was measured, every sound magnified in the stillness of the decaying world around them. The echoes of their footsteps seemed to bounce off the walls of the broken structures, amplifying their every move. Varroc's senses were heightened, every hair on the back of his neck standing on end. The wind shifted. Suddenly, there was movement, an imperceptible shift in the shadows. Neris's hand flew to the small weapon at her hip, but before she could react, Varroc held up a hand. Wait, he muttered, his voice low and steady. He had felt it too, the faintest brush of movement. A presence, just beyond the reach of his senses. He wasn't sure if it was a trick of the wind or if something more sinister was lurking just beyond their line of sight. A crackling sound filled the air, cutting through the silence like a blade. It was almost too quiet to hear, but Varroc's trained ears caught it, something that wasn't supposed to be there. Neris's eyes darted around, her claws flexing in anticipation. He's here. Varroc's grip tightened on his rifle. We need to stay sharp. They moved slowly, deliberately, each footstep a deliberate choice in the game of cat and mouse they were now trapped in. As they passed through the skeletal remains of what was once a towering structure, a sudden gust of wind swept through the open space, sending dust swirling around them. Then it happened. A sound. It was a whisper at first, barely perceptible. But then, louder, more distinct, a voice, or perhaps a laugh, from the shadows. "You're not so different." Varroc's breath caught in his throat. The voice was human, no mistaking it. But it was calm, almost casual, as if the speaker were enjoying some private joke. "Show yourself," Varroc demanded, his voice a low growl. The laugh echoed again, soft but chilling. "Why would I do that? You're the ones hunting me." The voice was distant now, fading in and out like an echo. Nerys's fur stood on end. "His toying with us." The silence returned, suffocating in its intensity. The only sound now was the distant, muffled groan of the wind sifting through the ruins. Varroc's senses were on fire, every muscle in his body screaming for action, but there was nothing except the oppressive stillness. Then, without warning, the ground beneath their feet shifted. A trap. Varroc instinctively jumped back, grabbing Nerys's arm and pulling her to safety just as a series of sharp, metallic spikes shot up from the earth, narrowly missing them both. The deadly trap snapped shut with a deafening clang, sending a spray of dust and debris into the air. "Damn it!" Varroc hissed, his heart racing. He crouched low, peering through the smoke and dust. Nerys growled under her breath, her claws still extended. "He's not playing games anymore." Varroc's eyes scanned the surroundings, trying to pinpoint any movement. "He's learning. Watching us." The words barely left his mouth when a shadow moved, this time, closer. A blur in the distance. It was too fast to track with the naked eye, but it was there, shifting like a phantom. "His coming," Varroc whispered. Nerys nodded, her face hardening with determination. "We end this now." They moved again, faster this time, covering ground with purpose. They had to find him before he found them. But no matter how fast they ran, no matter how alert they were, the human was always a step ahead. A whisper cut through the air once more. "You think you can kill me? You don't even know who you're dealing with." The words came from all around them, disorienting, like 1,000 voices speaking in unison. Varroc's skin prickled. "He's got us in a trap. We need to get out of here." Nerys was already scanning for escape routes. "There. The old subway tunnels." She pointed toward an opening in the crumbled ruins, partially concealed by overgrowth and rubble. "We move in, and we stay low. He won't expect it." Varroc nodded, already heading for the tunnel. "Move fast. Stay quiet." They darted toward the tunnel, their bodies low to the ground, adrenaline pumping through their veins. The shadows seemed to swallow them whole as they entered the dark, claustrophobic passage. But even as they moved into the darkness, Varroc couldn't shake the feeling that they were not escaping, they were being led there. The tunnel was cold, its damp air clinging to Varroc's skin like a suffocating shroud. The walls were slick with moisture, the faint sound of dripping water echoing through the darkness. The only light came from the faint glow of their helmets, casting long shadows across the jagged walls. Every step felt like a march toward the inevitable, there was no escape. Nerys moved silently ahead of him, her feline senses sharp as ever. Her ears twitched at every small noise, her eyes glinting with a predator's hunger. She was always calm, always calculating. But even she couldn't hide the tension in her movements. Varroc's mind raced. They had been lured into the depths of this forsaken city, led into a labyrinth with no clear exit. The human was no longer just a target. He was a force, playing a game where the rules seemed to bend with every turn. "We need a plan," Nerys murmured, her voice barely a whisper. "We can't keep running like this." Varroc's gaze flicked around the dark tunnel, the walls closing in. "We don't have time for a plan. We just need to find him before he finds us." She stopped in her tracks, her eyes narrowing. What if he's already found us? Varroc's heart skipped a beat. He had considered that. The human had been ahead of them at every turn, anticipating their moves, staying one step ahead like a shadow they could never catch. Then it's already too late. His voice was a low growl, the weight of their situation settling in. A sudden movement caught his eye, a flicker in the dark, too fast to pinpoint. A whisper of sound. A breath of wind. It was as though the human was never far, always just beyond their reach, playing with them like a hunter does with prey. "Stay close," Varric warned. "He's watching." Nerys took a step forward, her claws flexing. "Then let him watch." They pressed on, moving through the tunnel with a growing sense of urgency. Every corner seemed to conceal more danger, every shadow an opportunity for the human to strike. Varric's grip on his rifle tightened. His instincts screamed at him to be prepared for anything. Another whisper. This time, clearer. A voice that echoed through the silence, chilling and intimate. "You're not the first to come here. You won't be the last." Varric's eyes darted around. "Enough games." The voice laughed, a low, menacing chuckle that reverberated through the walls. "Games? This is no game. It never was." Before Varric could respond, the ground trembled beneath their feet, a low rumble shaking the tunnel like a distant quake. The walls cracked, and debris cascaded from above. Nerys jumped back, narrowly avoiding a falling piece of rubble. Varric swore under his breath, eyes scanning for the source. The human had triggered something, an ambush. The lights on their helmets flickered, plunging them into near darkness. A heartbeat later, the flickering light returned, but it was too late. A figure moved in the shadows, just on the edge of their vision. A blur of movement too fast for them to track. Varric's finger tightened on the trigger, but before he could fire, the figure vanished again. "Where is he?" Nerys growled, her voice filled with frustration. "Not here," Varric said, his gaze sweeping the tunnel. "We've been set up." The air felt thick, oppressive. It wasn't just the darkness, they were being hunted, and the hunter was closing in. "Varric, we need to." The sound of a distant crash interrupted Nerys. Varric whipped his head around, instinctively raising his weapon. But there was nothing. Just the echoes of their own breathing, the oppressive silence settling over them once again. Nerys tensed. "He's playing with us." Varric's eyes narrowed. "And we're letting him." The echo of their own footsteps seemed louder now, as though the very tunnels were mocking their pursuit. Every movement felt sluggish, like the air was pushing back against them, forcing them to slow. Nerys stopped suddenly, her head tilting slightly as she listened. "Something's ahead." Varric barely had time to react when a flash of movement surged toward them, too fast to catch. A scream shattered the stillness. Varric's heart clenched as he turned just in time to see Nerys's form being dragged into the darkness, a single arm reaching out toward him. "No!" He leapt forward, grabbing her arm, pulling with every ounce of strength he had. Her claws scraped at the floor, but she was being dragged away, her body lifting off the ground as though she weighed nothing. "Varric!" Her voice was frantic, strained. He tightened his grip, but it wasn't enough. The human was too strong, too fast, and Nerys was slipping from his grasp. With a final, desperate pull, Varric yanked her back toward him, using his full weight to counter the unseen force that had gripped her. She fell back to the ground, panting, her fur matted with sweat. Varric barely registered the impact of his weapon against the ground as he pushed Nerys behind him, every nerve in his body alight with a new fear. The human was no longer playing. The tunnel rumbled again, and the walls shifted. They were trapped. A voice echoed through the darkness. "You should have stayed out of this, Varric Tyran." Varric's eyes widened, his pulse quickening. He recognized the voice now, it was the human. "Who are you?" Varric demanded. The voice laughed again, cold and derisive. "I am your worst nightmare. And you are about to become mine." A blur of motion exploded from the shadows. Varric barely had time to react, his rifle raising instinctively, but the human was already gone, vanishing as quickly as he had appeared. The walls closed in on them once again. Varric's breath came in short, rapid bursts as he scanned the darkened passage. They were in the human's world now. And there was no way out. The tunnel had become an oppressive labyrinth, its winding corridors seemingly endless, swallowing them whole at every turn. Varric's breathing was shallow, his pulse quickening with each step. The air had grown thick with the scent of decay and the bitter taste of fear. It wasn't the dark that frightened him, he had faced worse, but the sense of being hunted, watched, as though the very walls had eyes. Neris was beside him, her posture tense, her claws flexing in preparation for whatever came next. Her feline eyes scanned the shadows with growing unease. "His close," she murmured, barely a whisper. Her tail flicked nervously. Varric nodded but said nothing. His mind raced through every possible scenario, calculating the odds, but the one thing he couldn't predict was the human. The enemy they were facing was not a simple assassin or a rogue hunter. No, this one was something more, something that bent the rules of combat in ways they couldn't fathom. It was as if the human had mastered the art of invisibility itself, a predator capable of disappearing in plain sight. "I don't like this," Neris said, her voice taut. "We've been walking in circles for too long. He's setting us up." Varric tightened his grip on his rifle. "Then let's make it harder for him to do so." He motioned for her to follow closely. "Stay sharp." Every movement now felt like a trap. They had been led deeper into the tunnel system, each step drawing them further from the exit. It was as if the human was drawing them in, like a spider waiting for its prey to come closer. The hairs on the back of Varric's neck prickled, his instincts screaming that they were playing right into the human's hands. Suddenly, the tunnel ahead flickered with a faint light, just visible enough to catch their attention. It was a strange, unnatural glow, something that had no place in a city that had long since fallen into disrepair. "Trap," Varric growled, taking a step back. But Neris, ever the pragmatist, stepped forward, her ears twitching as she listened. "It's a beacon," she said, her voice full of suspicion. "Maybe he's leading us to something, or someone." Varric hesitated but nodded. "Keep your eyes open." He moved cautiously toward the glow, every step measured, every sense alert. The closer they got, the more oppressive the air became, as if the very space around them was constricting. As they approached the source of the light, a low hum began to reverberate through the walls. The ground trembled beneath their feet. Varric's heart skipped a beat. "He's toying with us," he muttered. "Or preparing to end it," Neris replied. The glow intensified, and the walls shifted, revealing a wide chamber beyond the tunnel, a stark contrast to the dark, claustrophobic passages they had just traversed. In the center of the chamber, illuminated by harsh artificial light, stood a figure. It was him. The human. He stood motionless, his silhouette bathed in the cold light, his body hidden beneath a cloak of shadows. His face was obscured, but even in the dim illumination, there was something unnerving about the way he moved, or rather, the way he didn't move. He was still, yet it felt as though he was everywhere at once. Varric's hand instinctively gripped his weapon tighter. "Show yourself," he demanded, his voice a low growl. The human's lips twitched, barely noticeable, before he responded with a calm, mocking tone. "You really think you can kill me, don't you?" His voice was smooth, almost soothing, but it sent a chill down Varric's spine. "You, who have killed thousands without a second thought. You, who think of yourselves as the hunters. And yet, here you are, at my mercy." Neris's eyes narrowed. "We don't need mercy. We just need you to die." The human laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Such arrogance. But do you know why you're here? Why I brought you here?" Varric's instincts flared, his heart pounding. He was no longer dealing with a mere threat. This human was something else entirely, something more dangerous than any assassin or warlord he had faced. The human began to move, slow and deliberate, as though time itself bent around him. He stepped into the center of the room, his form shifting like smoke, his presence overwhelming. "You see," he said, "I am the last of my kind. And while you were busy destroying everything you could find, I was waiting. Watching. Learning." Varric's rifle leveled on him, but before he could fire, the human disappeared again, a blur in the air. His voice echoed from every direction, impossibly distant, yet close enough to rattle Varric's mind. "I was patient. I knew you would come. You're predictable. I've seen it all before." Neris's hand shot out, her claws gleaming in the light. "You can't hide forever." The human's laugh was louder this time, and suddenly, he reappeared directly behind Varric. The air shifted, and the temperature dropped. His breath was cold against Varric's neck. "You think you're clever," he whispered, his voice like ice. "But you've only just begun to understand how little you know about the world you're trying to conquer." Varric swung around, but the human was gone again, leaving only the echo of his words. "You were never meant to survive this. The game was rigged the moment you took the contract." Naris turned, her eyes scanning the room, looking for any sign of movement. "His fast. Too fast." Varric's mind raced. The human wasn't just trying to kill them, he was trying to break them. Every moment, every word, every movement was designed to make them doubt their own power. He was a force of nature, one that no weapon could defeat. "Varric," Naris said quietly, her voice trembling with the weight of realization. "He's not hunting us. We're hunting him." Varric's grip on his rifle tightened, a fire igniting in his chest. "And we'll make him regret ever thinking he could win." The sound of footsteps echoed from every direction. They were surrounded, but they were no longer afraid. They were not just prey. They were hunters too. "Come on, human," Varric muttered, his voice laced with fury. "Let's see how long you can hide."